This is a Sicho from Likutei Sichos, Chelek Zayin, Parshas Pekudei, Sicha Gimel, and the topic of the Sicha is that the end of this week's Parsha, which is also the end of Sefer Shmos, speaks about the Hashras HaShechina in the Mishkan, and then the Parsha concludes with the Seder HaMasais. And there are 5 parts in the Sicha. The Rebbe will, number 1, ask a question on this. Number 2, present and reject an answer. Number 3, ask and answer what's the connection between the beginning and end of the whole Sefer Shmos. Number 4, based on this, answer the original question. And number 5, present the Hira from this for each and every Yid. After the Torah recounts in detail the erecting of the Mishkan, and afterwards about the Hashras HaShechina in the Mishkan, as it says, Vayichas ha'onon es oil moed, uchved Hashem molias HaMishkan, and also that the Hashras HaShechina was so great that v'lo yochel Moshe lovay el oil moed, ki shachan olav ha'onon, uchved Hashem molias HaMishkan. So after telling us about the building of the Mishkan, and the Hashras HaShechina in the Mishkan, and the extent of the Hashras HaShechina, so then the Torah relates, Uvehe olis ha'onon ma'ala Mishkan, when the Onon rose up from on the Mishkan, Yisu b'nei Yisrael b'chol masayim, then the Yidden would travel all of their journeys, V'im lo ya'ale ha'onon, but if the Onon did not rise up, v'lo yisu ad yem he'olasei, then the Yidden would not travel until the day that it rose up from on the Mishkan. And we have to understand, because l'chayra, these 2 psukim that speak about the traveling of the Yidden belong where the Torah speaks about the Seder HaMasais of Yidden in the Midbar, and where it is indeed repeated and at great length in Parshas Ba'aleischa. And so the question is, what's the connection between the Seder HaMasais, that specifically when Behe Holes HaOnon, then Yisu, and Vim Lo Ya'ale HaOnon, then V'lo Yisu, with the topic of the Parsha here, which speaks about the Hashras HaShechina in the Mishkan. So these 2 psukim over here seem to be out of place. The Soferner explains the connection of these 2 psukim to the Hashras HaShechina in the Mishkan, and he says that the Ve'olis ha'onon ma'ala Mishkan Yisu itself is actually an indication of the extent of how much the Hashras HaShechina was in the Mishkan. It was to the extent that Shelo hoya mistalik klal mishom at shehoy Yisrael tzrichim l'nsoya, that it wouldn't leave the Mishkan at all until the Yidden had to leave. So actually these 2 psukim do relate to the idea of Hashras HaShechina in the Mishkan, and they're expressing the extent of the Hashras HaShechina in the Mishkan. However, this explanation is l'chayra not glatt, it's not smooth, because we can see from the wording of the pasuk that it's coming to relate the Seder HaMasais and not the extent of the Hashras HaShechina. And in the words of the Medrash says, what are these psukim? Zeh Sipur HaMasais. This is the story of the Masais. So clearly it's telling us the Sipur, the Seder HaMasais. And so the question is, how does it belong over here at the end of the Parsha that speaks about the building of the Mishkan and the Hashras HaShechina and the extent of the Hashras HaShechina in the Mishkan? The question is even more difficult based on the teaching of Chazal that the beginning of Sefer Vayikra, the Vayikra al Moshe, is a continuation to what's written before the pasuk of Uve'olis ha'onon, that V'lo yochel Moshe lovay el oil moed. Chazal explained in the Medrash that the connection between the 2 psukim is that it's telling us that Moshe couldn't enter the oil moed, V'lo yochel Moshe lovay el oil moed, until Vayikra al Moshe. So that's the connection between V'lo yochel Moshe to Vayikra al Moshe. So now it comes out that in between this hemshech of the psukim of V'lo yochel Moshe and Vayikra al Moshe, the Torah interrupts with a side point which l'cha'era has nothing to do with the Mishkan. So besides for the difficulty that it doesn't seem to belong here, now it's even a greater difficulty. It's not just that it doesn't belong here. It actually interrupts the flow and the continuation of the Parshias. Now we're going to present an idea that both relates to the question and also leads into the answer. So all matters of the Torah are precise. Therefore, since the Medrash says that Vayikra al Moshe, which is the beginning of Sefer Vayikra, is a hemshech from V'lo yochel Moshe, the end of our parsha, so it's understood that the connection is not just in terms of those 2 psukim, but also in the teichen of the 2 parshias, the content of both parshias. Meaning to say that Sefer Vayikra, whose inyan is Sefer HaKarbonis, comes in continuation not just to the story of the building and erecting of the Mishkan, which is the place where the Karbonos are brought, but rather also to the details in the manner of the Hashras HaShechina in Mishkan, which is recounted in the Parsha, and especially since the manner of the Hashras HaShechina is at the very end of this Parsha. Now that we have this idea in place, that the connection is also between the Teichen of the two parashiyos, so we can say that this is also the reason why after V'layachol Moshe, the Pasuk interrupts and talks about how the Seder HaMasayis of the Yidden was connected to Uve'alis Ha'onon Me'ala Mishkan, the Silka Shechina from the Mishkan. This is because the Teichen of the Inyan of Karbonis, as we're going to explain, more than it's connected to the Hashras HaShechina in the Mishkan, it's connected specifically with the need for the Silka Shechina for the Masayis of the Yidden, as we'll explain. In order to understand the connection between the Teichen of the two parashas and the connection of Parshas Vayikra specifically to the Silka Shechina for the Masayis, so we'll understand it by first explaining the connection between the end of Sefer Shmos, which is in our parsha, and specifically these psukim that we're discussing, to its beginning, like the rule of no tzayfan b'tchilasan utchilasan b'seifen, that the beginning and end are connected to one another. And this connection is also expressed in that the names of the first and last sedra of the sefer are about the inyan of minyan. The first parsha is Shmos, and as Rashi explains, afal pishem non chazar umnon leidiach chibasan shenimshulu lekechavim, that Hashem is counting the Yidden over here in order to show His love for the Yidden, that the Yidden are compared to stars. And Pekudei, as Rashi says, refers to the counting of the Mishkalei Nidves HaMishkan, the weight of the donations to the Mishkan, Kol Kelev L'chol Avedasai, all of the Kelim and all of the different things in the Mishkan. So both of them connect to the inyan of minyan, to the inyan of counting. And there's a difficulty over here. The Teichen of Sefer Shmos is Geulasan Shel Yisrael, the Geula of the Yidden from Mitzrayim. According to this, it should come out that the inyan of Geula is connected with the inyan of Minyan, which the inyan of Minyan is what connects the beginning with the end of the Sefer. And so it's not understood, because Minyan and Geula are l'cheira complete opposites. When we count something, it shows that it's limited in the total of the minyan, and the minyan emphasizes this, that it's limited. On the other hand, Geula reflects a state of leaving Meitzarim and Galus and limits. And so it comes out that minyan and Geula are opposites. And we also find this paradox in the beginning of the Sefer itself. The name of the Sedra, which hints to the Teichen of the whole Sedra, is Shmos. Now the word Shmos refers to the limited number of Bnei Yisrael Habayim Mitzrayim, the Yidden who arrived at the time in Mitzrayim. And immediately afterwards, the pasuk tells us, "Uvnei Yisrael paru vayishrutzu vayirbu vayatzmu b'ma'id ma'id," which indicates a multitude that's completely out of the ordinary. And since also this is part of Sefer Shmos, so it comes out that also the paru vayishrutzu b'ma'id ma'id is part of the teichen of the inyan of minyan. And the question is that they seem to be opposites. And we find a similar thing at the end of the Sefer. The word Pekudei, as mentioned, relates to counting and being limited, like the Klei Mishkan, which had a number and were limited. However, at the conclusion of Parshas Pekudei, it speaks about how lo yachol kishachin, how the Hashras HaShechina in the Mishkan was not limited. It's telling us that v'lo yachol Moshe lavoi el oil moed. The Hashras HaShechina in the Mishkan was even higher than the Yechelis of Moshe, the Nivchar mikol mina Adam. So it comes out that we have opposites in all of these areas. Both the beginning and end of the Sefer are connected to the inyan of minyan, and the inyan of minyan is an inyan of gvul. And on the other hand, the whole Sefer is a Sefer of Geula, which is the idea of leaving gvul, leaving hagbalas. And also when we look at the beginning of the Sefer itself, or the end of the Sefer itself, again we see this idea emphasized. That on one hand you have the inyan of minyan, the inyan of gvul, and on the other hand you have the inyan of bli gvul. So now we're going to present an idea that based on this idea we're going to answer the question. So the general explanation of this is, even though the ultimate purpose is to achieve Bli Gvul Geula, which is higher than the Medida V'Agbala of the world, nevertheless the Kavanah isn't that it should become Eis Gvul, that there should just be Bli Gvul. Rather the Kavanah is that there should be the connection of Bli Gvul and Gvul. And we find this idea both in the inyan of minyan, which is the beginning of Sefer Shmos, and in the inyan of the Hashras HaShechina in the Mishkan, which is in the end of Sefer Shmos in our Parsha, Parshas Pekudei. As we find by the minyan of Yidden, it says, V'haya mispar b'nei Yisrael, so we're talking about a mispar. It should be K'chol hayom asher lo yimad v'lo yisofer. The mispar will be lo yimad v'lo yisofer. And similarly by the Mishkan, the Hashras HaShechina, which was above Medida V'Agbala, was in the Klei HaMishkan, which are with the minyan and the Medida. And this is because the Kavan al Yaina is that Nisava Kadosh Baruch Hu liyis loy dira b'tachtenim, and therefore two things must be achieved. Number one, it must be a dira loy yizbarach to atzmusa yizbarach, which is entirely higher than the world. And number two, the dira must be b'tachtenim. In Olam Haza Gashmi Shein Tachten Lamata Mimenu, specifically in Midah and Gvul. Now these two inyanim, that on one hand it's a dira lo yizbarach, lo latz musay, and on the other hand it's betachtenim, and olam haza gashmi, so they generally express themselves in the difference between the Neshamas Yisrael and the world. The pnimius inyan of dira lo yizbarach, where is that? Is dafka loder v'lishkin ben Neshamas Yisrael, sheyu knesses Yisrael mochen l'shifte yizbarach. It's specifically in the Yidden that there could be a real dira. Because since Yisrael v'kutsha b'richu kul echad, so therefore Yidden are the true dira for Atzmus Yisbarach. Yidden are kaviyachol one thing with Atzmus. Not so the dira b'tachtenim in the world. That's only that it's felt in the world, how its entire existence is only from Atzmus. And min ba'aladei ein shum metzius klal lo klal. But not that it itself is a dira for Atzmus. It's just that it has no existence outside of Atzmus. And it's just that the dira is accomplished specifically in Tachtoinim. So in other words, the dira is in the Yidden. And how is it accomplished in the Yidden? Specifically in Tachtoinim. In the avodah of Yidden of making Gashmius into a Klif Relikus in Eilam Hazat Achtin. It's specifically through this avodah that the Sheirish of Neshamas Yisrael, how they are one with Atzmusa Yisbarach, is revealed. In another signon, another way of explaining this, when is it revealed that Yidden are a true Dira La Yizbarach, meaning that Yidden are completely one with Atzmusa Yizbarach without any limit? It's specifically when also the Medida V'Agbala of the Tachtenim isn't an obstacle. Rather to the contrary, through the Aveda of Yidden, the Tachtenim themselves become a fitting place for a Dira La Yizbarach. So it comes out that the real Dira is in Yidden. It's just that it's expressed and revealed and accomplished through the Aveda of the Yidden in the Tachtenim. And so we have that the Dira La Yizbarach is connected to Neshamas Yisrael, and the Betachtenim is reflected in the Avodah and Eilam Haza Gashmi. Based on this, we can now answer our second question. So now we can understand why the beginning of Sefer Shmos is about the minyan of Yidden, and the end of Sefer Shmos is about the minyan of the Klei HaMishkan. In Sefer Bereshis, it speaks about the creation itself, before its kavanah of Bishvil HaTeira or Bishvil Yisrael was revealed in it. In Sefer Shmos, it already speaks about the Yidden, how they were born as Am Yisrael, and it speaks about the Torah, which through Yidden and the Torah, the Kavanah Sabriya is accomplished. And there is a beginning and an end to this. The beginning, which means the Iker and the Pnimius of the Kavanah, is the Yidden, the way they are one with Atzmusa Yizbarach. And this is the inyan of the minyan of Yidden in Parshas Shmos. Like Rashi says, that the counting of the Yidden over there is Lohidiachi Basan, to show Hashem's love for the Yidden, that the Yidden are one with Hashem. And therefore this minyan was through Hashem himself. Hashem counts them in the Torah. And then there is the end, which means the way the kavanah is actually accomplished. How is this kavanah of making a Dira La Yizbarach in the Yidden, to show how the Yidden are one with Atzmusa Yizbarach, how is that accomplished? It's through making a mishkan out of physical objects. So here in Sefer Shmos, where it already speaks about Yidden and Torah, it already speaks about the Kavanah Al Yena, which is Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Liyizbarach Dira B'tachtenim. So over here it tells us about both of the aspects of this Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Liyidira B'tachtenim. There is where this Dira is accomplished, it's in Neshamas Yisrael, in the minyan of Yidden at the beginning of Sefer Shmos, and then there's how it's accomplished. How is it accomplished? Through the Avodah of Yidden in Tachtenim, which is in the end of Sefer Shmos, in Parshas Pekudei, which speaks about making a mishkan in Olam Haza Gashmi out of physical objects, out of Dvarim Gashmiim. According to all of this, we can now come back to our first and original question about the Sipur HaMasais seeming to be out of place, where it talks about the building of the Mishkan and the Gilei Elokus and the extent of the Gilei Elokus in the Mishkan, and especially since it seems to be an interruption between the inyan of the Gilei Elokus in the Mishkan and the next parasha, Vayikra al Moshe. So now let's see how what we explained answers this question. So since the Shorish of Neshama is Yisrael, the way they are one with Atzmusei Yisbarach, is revealed like we explained specifically in the Avodah and Tachtonim, in a place of Helam ve'Esther, so it's understood that this is accomplished even more than through the Avodah of building the Mishkan, which the Mishkan is a place of Gilei Elokus. It's accomplished even more than that through the Avodah with a Tachton that Mitzat Atzmai, unlike the Mishkan, is not a Kli for Elokus. And more generally, it's in the Avodah in the time of Galus when the Elokus doesn't shine begili in the world, because then you have the real inyan of a Tachton. And this is explanation for why by the story of the Melechas HaMishkan and the Ashras HaShchina in the Mishkan, which is all about the inyan of making the dira through the Avodah and the Tachtonim, that over there the Pasuk talks about the Sipur HaMasais, which is connected with Uvei Hayalei Sa'anon, that there is no longer the Gilei Elokus. The tachlis of the Mishkan, which is to make from Tachtonim a dir Yisbarach, is actually mainly accomplished through the Mishkan giving the koyach that it should also be this way b'chol masayim when there isn't the Gilei Elokus and it's a real Tachton. And as the Alter Rebbe explains that the Masais in the Midbar alludes also to the bir of the Midbar Amim during the time of Galus. There in Galus, when Shchinta begilusa, that there's no Gilei of the Shchina, Yidden are Mavar and Mahapech, the Helam of the world, that there too there should be a Gilei Elokus. So it comes out that over there you have the greater inyan of making the Dir Le'Yisbarach through the Avodah in a real Tachton, in a greater Tachton, than the Tachton there is in the Kalim of the Mishkan and in the Mishkan. And now we can move on to answer the second part of the question, how the Seder HaMasais is not an interruption between the Ashras HaShchina and the Mishkan and the V'loyachol Moshe to Vayikra al Moshe. So this inyan, that the greater the Tachton, then the more it is an Avodah of Dir B'Tachtenim, is actually expressed in the inyan of the Mishkan itself, in that the Ikar Avodah in the Mishkan is Avodas HaKarbanos. The difference between the Mishkan itself and Avodas HaKarbanos is that the Tachlis by the building of the Mishkan is not so much in being Maila the Gashmias objects with which the Mishkan was made, but mainly in making a place Lamata where there will be Ashras HaShchina from Lamaila. So it's not so much about the inyan of the Tachdonim as much as it is the Amshachom Maila of a Gilei Elokus, which this Ashra is infinitely higher than the Gashmis objects. So it's not so much of an emphasis on the Tachtonim as much as it is on the Amshachal Momayla of the Gilei Elokus. However, the inyan of Avodas HaKarbanos is to be mevarer and maila the Gashmis animal and make it a carbon Lashem into Kedusha. So over there you have the emphasis of the Avodah in Tachtonim. And therefore, even though the Avodas HaKarbanos, meaning the Amshachas HaKedusha through it, is a preparation to reach higher, which is the Hashra, which was in the Mishkan, and this is Taka the reason, that the Aleph of Vayikra is a small Aleph, which indicates Tzimtzum, because the Eira Kedusha, which is Nimshach through Avodas HaKarbanos, which is the Teichen of Sefer Vayikra, is smaller than the Ashra, which is in the Mishkan. Still, nevertheless, specifically through the Avodas HaKarbanos, we arrive at a higher purpose in the Mishkan, which is to make from Dvarim Tachtenim Gashmius a Kli for Elokus. So even though the Amshacha, the air, is not as great of an air, but the Kavana, the purpose, is much greater, which is to make a Dira in a place of Tachtenim. And now it's understood how Vayikra al Moshe and Sefer HaKarbanos in general is a continuation also to Uveheyales Ha'anon. The same Nakuda is highlighted in both of them, that the purpose of the Mishkan is accomplished also, and to the contrary, even more so in a place where there isn't the Ashras HaShchina that's in the Mishkan. And that's expressed both in the Seder HaMasais, which reflects the idea of Uveheyales Ha'anon, the inyan of Helam and Hester, as well as in Karbanos, which the emphasis by the Karbanos is that you're taking a Davar Gashmi, that's a Tachten Mitzad Atzmai, and you're making it into a Kli for Elokus. And even though during the Avodah of Vayisu, after the Uveyale Sa'anon, the Gilei Elokus is lacking, however, specifically through this is revealed the Sheirish of Yidden, the way they are united with Atzmutzei Yisbarach. Like we explained, that the way the Dir Yisbarach happens in the Yidden is through the Avodah in Tachtonim, which is expressed in the travels of the Yidden when there wasn't the Gilei Elokus of the Mishkan. And this is the Pirush Pnimi in what it says, Uveyale Sa'anon me'ala Mishkan Yisu b'nei Yisrael b'chol ma'aseyim. In Chitzonius, it indeed looks like an inyan of Siluk HaShchina. It says, Uvei uvehalis ha'anon. However, in Pnimius, through this avodah, one goes higher than the anon of Mishkan. It's uvehalis ha'anon me'ala Mishkan, and we are mamshechet in the Mishkan in the next time that the Mishkan camps. And so it comes out that even though the Gilei Elokus is in the Mishkan, but the idea of the Mishkan is that there should be a place of Gilei Elokus. Whereas in the travels of the Yidden, there the whole idea is that there's a tachtin, and it's the inyan of making a dir lo yizbarach in that tachtin. And in that way, and through that, it's revealed the dir lo yizbarach in the Yidden, how Hashem and the Yidden are truly one. And this is the hira to each and every one in their avodah, notwithstanding the darkness of the galus, and especially that each person knows their personal galus. Still, one must know that through a yid fulfilling the shlichus of Hashem b'chol masayim, no matter the type of masa that it may be, if one's masa is connected with onon Hashem, meaning that specifically uve'alis ha'onon, v'im lo ya'ale v'lo yisu, meaning that a person knows that ma'avaya mitzadei gever koinonu, that wherever one goes and in whichever situation one may be found, they are connected with the shlichus of Hashem, of la'ases lo yizbarach dira b'tachtenim, and so one's masa is in accordance with Ratzon Elyon. So then they will have uve'alis ha'onon in the positive, l'mal yusa, that they will get from higher than the onon. And this is even though the gili of the onon is even higher than the yechelis of the b'china of Moshe in one's nefesh. Like we said, v'lo yachol Moshe lavo yal oil moyed. And one is mamshechet in the following chanoya, in the following place, all the way until a person achieves the level of Yisrael v'kutshabrichu kulo chad.